Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Bolt Gun. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint a Genestealer Cults Jackal Alphus. So this is the Jackal Alphus. I've undercoated him and kind of base coated him in Zandri Dust because that's the colour I'm going to be doing the bikes and the vehicles. And this is the more or less the colours of the Genestealer Cults that I've been painting. So he was probably painted about maybe 2 years ago, something like that. So we're going to start working on him, and I've changed the way I paint some stuff, so he's going to look ever so slightly different, but they should still be in the same colours. So the first colour that we're going to use is Citadel Averland Sunset. I'm going to be using that to do his clothes. Now if you've watched any of the other videos, you've probably heard me talk about doing the sides of the Emperor, and that project not really taking off after I've painted a few characters, because I got sick of painting yellow. And if you've watched any of the videos, you'll also know that I'm now doing the Lamenters, who are yellow, and my Genestealer Cult, who are also in yellow. When we come back, I'll have all of the yellow finished. The next colour that we're going to use is Citadel Rakarth Flesh, and that's going to be to do the armour plates. When we come back, we'll have all the Rakarth Flesh finished. Now we're going to use some Vallejo Black. That's going to be to do his tyres, some parts of his rifle, some smaller details. When we come back, we'll have all the black finished. Moving on to Mournfang Brown, I'm going to use that to do his boots, most of his pouches, the straps, and all the stuff like that. We come back, we'll have all the Mournfang Brown finished. I'm going to do some metallics now. The first one that we're using is Vallejo Model Air Chrome. When we come back, we're going to have all the Model Air Chrome finished. Next colour that we're going to work with is Citadel Leadbelcher. That's to do a few more bits of the metallics. I wanted to use a few different colours just because it breaks up the model and it doesn't look all the same. So the Leadbelcher is a nice dark metallic compared to the Model Air Chrome's light metallic. So we're going to use this for sort of like the engine, some parts of the frame and the bodywork of the bike. When we come back, we'll have all the Leadbelcher finished. Now we're moving on to Retributor Armour, and that's going to be to do just a few of the details, a bit on the forks and a few little pieces of the bike. Like so. Now we're just going to use a touch of Mechanicus Standard Grey, and this is just going to be to do the radio, which is attached to the back of his bike. It may seem a bit of a strange colour to do the radio, but the Brood Brothers that I'm doing for the Genestealer Cults army have grey armour, and their vehicles are grey. So this will just tie in the equipment here the equipment from the Brood Brothers. Obviously you don't have to do it this, you can do any colour you want to, but that's the reason I'm doing the grey. When we come back, we'll have all Mechanicus standard grey finished. Now I'm going to move on to a little bit of Mephiston Red. I'm going to use that to do the lens on his rifle and also the dynamite strapped to the side of his bike. Like so. Next we're going to be using some Citadel Elysian green. We're just going to be using that to do the roll at the front and the bag on the back of his bike. When we come back, we'll have all the Elysian green finished. Now we're just going to work on his skin. I'm going to use Vallejo Flesh Base, one of the Panzer Ace's colours, and just give his skin its first layer. When we come back, we'll have all the flesh done. Next we're using Vallejo White, and that is going to be to do the headlights and the lamp on his shoulder. When we come back, we'll have all the white finished. Now the final thing that we're doing before we move on to the shades is using Citadel Zandri Dust. I'm going to use that to go over all the areas where I've maybe gone over it with the wrong colour paint, or where I've trimmed off some flash and it's left the grey plastic showing through. So areas like this and around the wheels, which will take some time to do. When we come back, we'll have all the Zandri Dust finished. Now we're moving on to the shades. We're going to use Citadel Nuln Oil. Going to use this to do all the silvery metallic areas. When we come back, we'll have all the Nuln Oil finished. Now we're moving on to Citadel Agrax Earthshade, and this is going to be to do the bulk of the bike and also the armour plates on the Alphus. When we come back, we'll have all of this colour finished. Next we're using Citadel Fuegan Orange, and that's just going to be to do the yellow of his jumpsuit. Like so. Next we're just using Athonian Camoshade to do the roll at the front and the bag at the back. like so. We're going to do skin now, and for that we're going to use Citadel Druchii Violet. Now the reason I use this rather than normal skin tone is because it gives them just a hint of purple, which kind of fits them in with the Genestealer, so when you see them all together, this skin has that slightly different tinge to it, like so. Now we're just going to use a tiny bit of Biel-Tan green. That's just going to be to do the hand grenade on his belt. We're also going to use it to do just a little screen on the equipment here, just to darken that up, like so. The final shade that we're using is Citadel Casandora Yellow. So just like that. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Citadel Lamenter's Yellow Glaze. That's just going to be to colour the lenses on his goggles, so that we can go for a golden colour to them. Returning to the base colours, we're first going to be using Citadel Rakarth Flesh and going over all his armour. When we come back, I'll have all of the Rakarth flesh finished. Now we've just added a little bit of white to the Rakarth flesh. We're just going to do a layer of highlights on the bits that we've just painted. When we come back, we'll have all this highlight finished. Now we're going to be reapplying some colour back to the bike using Citadel Zandri Dust. When we come back, we'll have all of the Zandri Dust finished. Now I've added a little bit of white to the Zandri Dust. We're just going to do a small number of highlights on the bike. As usual, we're just going to be doing these highlights on the top edges of the bike. When we come back, I have all of this highlight finished. Now returning to painting up his clothes, so we're going to be using Citadel Averland Sunset just to add the yellow back to his jumpsuit. When we come back, I'll have all the Averland Sunset finished. We've added some white to the Averland Sunset. We're now just going to do a highlight on his clothing. When we come back, I have all this yellow done. Now I've just added a little bit more white to the mix, and we're just going to do one final highlight on the yellow. When we come back, we'll have all of this highlight finished. Now we're returning to Citadel Mournfang Brown. We're just going to reapply some of the brown, making sure that we leave the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. And again, like we did with the yellow and like we did with the armour, we're only going to highlight the areas that are going to catch the light. You imagine the light coming down from above. When we come back, we'll have all the Mournfang Brown finished. Now we've added a little bit of white to the Mournfang Brown. We're just going to do a little highlight on all the brown bits. When we come back, we'll have all this highlight finished. We've just added a little bit more white to the mix. We're going to do one final highlight on leather. The only part that we're not going to highlight is the strap. So it leaves a different highlight on his leather gloves compared to the sling. When we come back, we'll have all this highlight finished. Now we're returning to Citadel Elysian Green. When we come back, we'll have all the Elysian Green finished. Now we've added a little bit of white to the Elysian Green. We're just going to highlight these parts. When we come back, we'll have all of this layer finished. Now we're returning to Mechanicus Standard Grey. Let's just reapply some colour over the shades. When we come back, we'll have all the Standard Grey finished. Now we've just added a little bit of white to the Mechanicus Standard Grey. I'm just going to highlight these grey areas. When we come back, have all of this highlight finished. Next we're using Vallejo White just to do one of his eyes and the headlights. Like so. Now I'm just going to use a tiny little bit of Vallejo Beige Brown. This is to do the straps on his bag at the back. Like so. Next, just going to use a little bit of Vallejo Black, and that is just to do a few small details on it. It's got the end of the cords here and the hooks, because they look to me like bungee cords. like so. I'm just going to use a little bit of Agrax Earthshade, and that is just to do the chords on the top of the bag. Like so. Now we're just going to use some Vallejo German Grey. This is just going to be to highlight the black. So you've got the tyres, his boots and his rifle. We come back, have all the German Grey finished. Now we're just using a little bit of Vallejo Modeler Chrome again, just to do a few little loops on his bag, also part of this hand grenade here. Like so. Now we're just returning to Vallejo Flesh Base. We're just going to start working on his face. Just going to reapply the flesh base first. When we come back, we'll have all this flesh base finished. Now we're just going to do the next highlight. We've added a little bit of white to the base flesh. I'm going to highlight this. Like so. We've just added some more white to the mix. We're going to do a further highlight on his skin. Like so. Finally, we're going to start working with Mephiston Red again. So we're going to use this to do his blasted charges and then start working on the lens of his rifle. We're going to add a little bit of white to the red. We're going to paint a crescent on the lens here. We just add a little bit more white to that mix. We're going to add another slightly smaller crescent. If you go onto the black when you're doing this, you can just go back and touch that up. Once we've finished it, we're going to do one final crescent there. This time a really small one. And then finally, I'm going to do a spot of light up here. A slight line of light just here, like so. Use a tiny bit of black to tidy up the edge. And then we can gloss varnish that as the completed lens. One thing I've realised we haven't done is the little bars on the headlights. So I'm just going to quickly use a little bit of Vallejo Model Air Chrome to do those. The final thing that we're going to do now is just add a tiny little bit of Fuegan orange to his goggles to give that the sort of like goldy orange colour that you get in some sunglasses. And once we gloss over that, that should look fine. With that final colour in place, I'm calling him complete. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.